Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. If you love creepy tales and bone-chilling mysteries, make sure to subscribe and join our haunted community. Hit the thumbs up if you're ready for tonight's scare, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you're never left alone in the dark. Let's dive into the horror. It happened 3 years ago, but I still can't walk into a department store without feeling a twinge of panic. It was Christmas Eve and I'd put off shopping. Big mistake, but I had no choice. My niece, Emma, had her heart set on this ridiculously popular doll, the Snowberry Fairy, and I'd promised her I'd get it. What I thought would be a quick trip to the mall turned into the most disturbing, surreal experience of my life. It wasn't ghosts or monsters. It was something far more real, something human. And that's what makes it so terrifying. The mall was packed, people jostled, carts crashed, and Christmas music blared from the speakers, almost drowning out the chaos. Every aisle was a battlefield, and I wasn't prepared for it. I fought my way to the toy section, hoping against hope that I'd find the doll. And there it was, the last Snowberry Fairy doll, sitting on the shelf like a shining beacon of holiday salvation. I moved toward it, and just as my fingers grazed the box, another hand shot out and grabbed it. I turned to see a woman, maybe mid-40s, her face twisted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She clutched the doll to her chest like it was gold. "Sorry," she said, her voice syrupy but sharp. "I got here first. Normally, I'd let it go. I mean, it's just a doll, right?" But something about the way she looked at me, it was like she enjoyed denying me, made my stomach churn. "Look," I said, trying to keep my tone polite, "it's for my niece. She's been asking for this all year." Her smile widened, but it wasn't friendly. "Well, I guess she'll have to wait till next year." I should have let it go. I know that now. But in that moment, something snapped. As she turned to leave, I followed her, weaving through the crowd. I wasn't even sure what I planned to do. Beg? Offer her money? I don't know, but I couldn't just let her walk away. She was fast, darting through aisles like she'd done this 100 times. And that's when I noticed something odd. She wasn't heading toward the checkout. She was moving deeper into the mall, toward the employee-only corridors. My gut told me to turn back, but curiosity got the better of me. I followed her through a side door and down a dimly lit hallway. The Christmas music faded, replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights and the echo of our footsteps. She turned a corner, and when I followed, she was gone. The hallway was empty except for a single door at the end. It was slightly ajar, and beyond it, I could hear faint voices. I pushed the door open and found myself in what looked like a storage room. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with unopened boxes. In the center of the room was a table, and around it sat 3 people. The woman who'd taken the doll, a man in a janitor's uniform, and another woman, younger, maybe in her 20s. They were laughing, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It was low, guttural, almost rehearsed. On the table between them were toys, dozens of them. Dolls, action figures, board games, all still in their boxes. But there was something wrong. The toys weren't just sitting there. They were disassembled. Pieces scattered everywhere, arms detached, eyes removed, stuffing pulled out. My heart started pounding. This wasn't some casual after-hours gathering. This was something else. Before I could back away, the woman from the toy aisle turned to me, still holding the Snowberry Fairy. "You're persistent," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. The others looked at me, their smiles identical to hers, wide, fake, predatory. "Look," I stammered, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I just want the doll. That's all." The janitor leaned back in his chair, inspecting me like I was an insect under a magnifying glass. "It's not about the doll," he said finally. His voice was deep, gravelly. It's about people like you." I didn't understand what he meant, but I didn't care. I just wanted to leave. "Okay, fine. Keep it. I'm out of here." The younger woman blocked the door before I could reach it. Her expression was unreadable. "Why do you want it so badly?" she asked. "It's for my niece," I said. "It's Christmas." At that, they all laughed, cold, hollow laughter that made my skin crawl. "Christmas," the woman with the doll said, almost spitting the word. "The season of greed, of desperation. You people will trample each other for a piece of plastic. And for what? To make yourselves feel better?" I didn't know how to respond. My throat felt dry and my legs itched to run, but something told me that wouldn't end well. The janitor stood up, towering over me. He picked up one of the disassembled toys from the table, a teddy bear missing its eyes, and tossed it to me. "Take it," he said. "Give it to your niece. Tell her it's special." "No," I said, my voice trembling. I'll just leave. I don't need the doll anymore." The older woman stepped closer, holding the Snowberry Fairy out to me. "Take this then," she said. Her smile was gone now, replaced by something darker. "But if you do, it comes with a cost." "What cost?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll see." I don't remember leaving the room. It's a blur of fluorescent lights and cold air. When I finally came to my senses, I was outside, clutching the doll. I don't even remember taking it, but there it was, pristine in its box. I gave it to Emma the next morning, and she loved it. For a moment, I felt relief, like maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But then, strange things started happening. The doll wouldn't stay in one place. Emma swore she left it on her bed, but we'd find it in the kitchen, the bathroom, even outside in the snow. Its eyes seemed to follow you, no matter where you stood. And at night, I could swear I heard faint laughter, low, guttural, like the people in that room. It's funny how something as simple as Christmas lights can feel so comforting, isn't it? That warm glow, the soft hum, they're like tiny guardians against the winter darkness. At least, that's how I used to feel. But after what happened 3 years ago, I can't look at them the same way. This isn't some made-up ghost story, and it's not about monsters lurking in the shadows. What happened to me was real, too real. And it all started with a new neighbor and their overly festive obsession with Christmas lights. It was the first week of December when they moved in. The house across the street had been empty for months, and I'll admit, I was curious. They arrived late at night. No moving truck, no introductions, just a dark car that pulled into the driveway. By morning, the house was different. It was covered, blanketed in Christmas lights. I'm talking every inch. Roof, windows, even the mailbox. And not just the typical white lights. These were bright, colorful, almost blinding. The kind that made your eyes hurt if you stared too long. The whole neighborhood was buzzing about it. "They must be trying to win some contest," my friend Mark joked. But something about it felt off to me. I couldn't explain it, but it was like the lights were too perfect, too deliberate, almost unnatural. A few days later, I saw the owner for the first time. I was taking out the trash when I noticed someone standing in their yard, fiddling with the lights. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing a long coat. His movements were jerky, almost mechanical, as he adjusted the cords. "Hey," I called out, trying to be friendly. "Your house looks amazing." He didn't respond, didn't even look at me. He just kept working, his back to me as if I wasn't there. I felt this strange chill, like I'd interrupted something I wasn't supposed to see. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m., the kind of wake-up where you don't know why you're awake, but something feels wrong. I looked out my window, and the first thing I noticed was how bright it was. The lights on the neighbor's house weren't just glowing, they were pulsing, slowly, rhythmically, like they were breathing. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was imagining things, but the lights just kept pulsing. And then, they started to change. The colors shifted, not in the usual soft fade, but violently, like flashes from a broken screen. Red, blue, green, yellow, over and over, faster and faster, until it was almost blinding. And then it stopped. Everything went dark. The sudden silence was almost worse. I leaned closer to the window, trying to see what was going on, and that's when I saw him, the man from earlier, standing perfectly still in the middle of his yard. He was staring directly at my house. The next morning, I couldn't shake the unease. I told Mark about it, but he just laughed. "It's Christmas, man. People go all out. You're overthinking it." Maybe he was right, but then I found something that made me question everything. It was a small object lying on my front porch, half buried in the snow. At first, I thought it was a broken bulb from the neighbor's lights, but when I picked it up, I realized it wasn't. It was an eye. Not a real one. At least, I don't think so. But it was disturbingly lifelike. The way the light reflected off it, the way it seemed to look at me. I dropped it immediately, my stomach churning. I wanted to confront the neighbor, but every time I worked up the courage, something stopped me. A sense of dread, like if I went over there, I wouldn't come back. A week before Christmas, things got worse. The lights started turning on at random times, flickering in patterns that didn't make sense. Sometimes they'd stay off for hours, and other times they'd light up the entire block. People in the neighborhood started complaining, but no one ever saw the man leave his house. Then came the noises. Late at night, I'd hear this faint buzzing, like an electrical hum, but layered with something else, something human. Whispers, faint, garbled voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. One night, the power in my house went out completely. I looked outside, and of course, the neighbor's house was still lit up like a carnival. I grabbed a flashlight and decided I'd had enough. I was going to find out what was going on. I crossed the street, the snow crunching beneath my boots. The lights on the house seemed brighter as I got closer, almost like they were watching me. When I reached the door, I hesitated. My gut was screaming at me to turn back, but I knocked anyway. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. But then, as I turned to leave, the door creaked open. Just a crack. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. No response. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of burning wires. The walls were covered in more lights, strings of them, tangled and pulsating softly. They didn't feel festive. They felt alive. And the buzzing noise was louder now, almost deafening. That's when I saw it. In the center of the living room was a massive structure, a tree made entirely of lights. But it wasn't just lights. There were pieces in there, pieces of toys, bits of metal, and something that looked disturbingly like bone. And at the base of the tree, slumped over like a discarded puppet, was the man. His body was twisted, his skin pale and waxy, as if he'd been drained of life. His eyes, those lifelike eyes, were staring blankly at the ceiling, glowing faintly in the light. I didn't stick around to see more. I ran. I don't even remember how I got back to my house, but I locked every door and window and sat in the dark until morning. When I finally worked up the nerve to call the police, they found nothing. The lights, the tree, the body, gone. It was like the house had been wiped clean. The neighbor, never seen again. The house stayed empty after that, and no one dared move in. Christmas at school was supposed to be magical. Twinkling lights, the scent of pine trees, and the cheerful chaos of students counting down the days to winter break. But the Christmas of my junior year, it was anything but magical. It was the kind of night that sticks with you, the kind you don't talk about unless you're sure people won't call you crazy. It was the last day of school before break, and I'd been roped into helping with the Christmas carnival. You know, games, hot chocolate, carols, the usual stuff. The gym was decked out in cheap decorations, glittering tinsel, fake snow, and a Santa throne that looked like it had seen better days. The event wrapped up around 8 p.m., and most people left in a hurry, eager to start their holidays. I stayed behind to help clean up because, well, I'm a sucker for extra credit. By 9 p.m., it was just me, the janitor, and Mrs. Caldwell, the drama teacher. We split up to tackle different parts of the gym. I was tasked with taking down the paper snowflakes from the rafters. Climbing the ladder was a pain, but I didn't mind the solitude at first. The first sign that something was off came when the music stopped. Mrs. Caldwell had been playing Christmas tunes on an old stereo, the kind with a cassette deck. 1 second, Bing Crosby was crooning about a white Christmas, and the next, silence. I looked down from the ladder and saw Mrs. Caldwell frowning at the stereo, smacking it lightly. "Must be the tape," she said, more to herself than to me. She gave up and left the gym, muttering about finding another one. That's when I realized the janitor was gone too. I hadn't seen him leave, but the large garbage bin he'd been dragging was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the gym felt a lot bigger and a lot darker. I shook it off and went back to work. As I reached for another snowflake, I heard it, the faint sound of a bell. Not the cheerful jingle of Christmas sleigh bells, but a single, low chime. It was coming from the hallway outside the gym. I froze, my hand gripping the edge of the ladder. "Mrs. Caldwell," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. No response. The bell chimed again, louder this time. Against my better judgment, I climbed down and walked toward the gym doors. The hallway was dark, the kind of dark that swallows you whole. I flipped the switch by the door, but the lights didn't come on. Of course they didn't. The sound of the bell came again, closer now. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was probably the janitor messing around. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight, but the screen stayed black. Dead. Perfect. Okay, very funny, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You got me. Let's call it a night, yeah?" The only answer was silence. Then, just as I turned to go back into the gym, I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, under the faint glow of an emergency exit sign, stood a figure. It was tall and thin, almost impossibly so, and it was holding something that glinted faintly in the dim light. A bell. I froze. The figure raised its arm and shook the bell once, the sound echoing down the hallway. Then it began to move toward me, slow and deliberate. I backed up, my breath coming in short gasps, until I hit the gym doors. I fumbled for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. The figure was halfway down the hallway now, its steps unnaturally silent. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. No response. The figure stopped about 10 feet away, just out of the light. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its eyes on me. It raised the bell again, shaking it twice this time. The sound was sharper, almost angry, and then it spoke. Its voice was low and raspy, like the wind through dead branches. "You shouldn't be here." I bolted. I don't even remember deciding to run. My legs just moved. I sprinted down the hallway, past the lockers and bulletin boards, toward the main office. The emergency lights flickered as I ran, casting everything in a sickly, uneven glow. I could hear the bell behind me, its chime keeping pace with my frantic footsteps. When I reached the office, I slammed the door behind me and locked it. My chest was heaving, and I pressed my ear to the door, listening. The hallway was silent. No footsteps, no bell. I slumped against the door, my hands shaking. That's when I noticed the Christmas tree in the corner of the office. It had been there all week, a cheerful little thing with multicolored lights and a star on top. Except now the lights were off, and the ornaments were gone. In their place were small blackened bells hanging from the branches. One of them chimed softly. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I unlocked the office door and ran straight for the nearest exit. The cold night air hit me like a punch, but I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove home, hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The next day, I told myself it was a stress-induced hallucination, a trick of the mind after a long day. But when I walked into the school on Monday, I noticed something. The hallway where I'd seen the figure was closed off, lined with yellow caution tape. I overheard a teacher saying something about a pipe bursting and flooding the area. But when I glanced at the floor, I didn't see water stains. Instead, I saw faint, dark scorch marks, as if something had been burned into the tiles. I've never stayed late at school again, and I've avoided Christmas carnivals altogether.